Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. We're inching towards being viral. We're well into being caffeinated, and we've always been a proudly sponsored weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and a fan base that's going to love its Keurig machine on Saturday night. I'm Eric Hansen, already Keurig's #1 fan and unpaid hype man. He's Tyler James, who doesn't lose any sleep, especially about his Chicago Bears. Together, we're the word salad avoiding content creators at blueandgold.com. On tonight's show, we're going to talk about life after football for the Notre Dame football team after losing Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa to a season-ending injury. We'll also give you all the other updates heading into Saturday night's late night at Stanford. We're going to do some what-ifs with the college football playoff. Take your questions, so start filling up that question portal. This is Football Never Sleeps. And Tyler is going to make me translate for him if he doesn't take his finger off the mute button.
Thank you for speaking up right away on that. Guess the mute button was on delay too, so apologies for that. But glad everyone joined us here an hour later than usual, given our media obligations today. But as always, Football Never Sleeps. And as Eric mentioned, Football Never Sleeps is presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. The holiday season is here, and Academy Sports and Outdoors has the legendary gifts you need at undefeatable prices every day. Shop in-store or online at academy.com to save on gifts on everybody's list, from football jerseys and basketball hoops to fire pits and deer stands. The most wonderful time of the year happens here. This Christmas, give the gift of fun from Academy Sports and Outdoors. It's a different hour for us, but a lot of the same faces in here, so we appreciate that. Jeff, Brian, Irish fan, T. Dawson, good to see you all. Thank you for spending time on your Monday night with us. We appreciate everyone tuning in on replay as well. No matter when you're watching this, we ask you to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. You should also consider a subscription to blueandgold.com, and in the next week, it's an especially good time to subscribe to blueandgold.com. Keep an eye out for Black Friday sales, Cyber Monday deals coming out later this week and into next week. You'll want to take advantage of those if you've been considering a subscription to the site. All right, well, let's get started with Marcus Freeman's press conference earlier today. He spoke with reporters to review the Syracuse game and look ahead to Saturday's game at Stanford. Eric, what were your biggest takeaways from Freeman's press conference?
So, for me, it was the limited number of questions today. I'm just kidding. I did a column on the mental approach and that Marcus Freeman kind of pervades through this program. And it comes up in a lot of areas. It comes up on how they replace Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa. It comes up on how they replace Tay Johnson. It even comes up on how they approach the late kickoff Saturday night. So I thought that was interesting, all those little conversations. I also thought Noah Burnett being kind of maybe back in the mix this week was interesting. And then my third take would have been Marcus Freeman still is coming up with fresh answers about Jeremiyah Love. And today it was about how complete of a football player he is. I thought it was a good question and a really good answer about how does he affect the game when he doesn't have the ball. Those are my three. How about yours, Tyler?
Yeah, I wrote about like Notre Dame strive for perfection. They had some guys who graded out at 100% from the Syracuse game. That's how well Notre Dame was playing against the Orange. I thought it was interesting to see how Marcus Freeman sort of talked about that. He described that, hey, we had 8 missed assignments still, even though that was from his recollection a season low. They even had some more missed assignments when the guys late in the game entered who don't get to play much. So they're going to hold those guys to the same standard. I thought it was interesting to see how you can win a game 70-7, and these are the things that we're still focused on. This is how we're trying to motivate guys to either match that effort or improve it. He even talked a little bit about ways he motivates players when it comes to senior day. He told a touching story about a Notre Dame fan who died at the Pittsburgh game and how he had connected with Notre Dame with that. So just You mentioned the fewer number of questions. It just felt like Marcus Freeman was really on a roll today. He was giving long answers, and that was part of the reason why there weren't as many questions. He was almost like he was preaching a little bit today, and not in a negative way, in a good way, and a lot of positive things about his program. So it was an interesting press conference, I thought, and maybe more reflective than normal from Marcus Freeman.
Yeah, there were good questions today too. I mean, really proud of the group that we have that covers the beat, because you can have, I can remember times on even this beat where it'd be like, what's it going to feel like running out of the tunnel one more time? And it's like, oh, shoot me. And it was really, really fun press conference.
And no one asked him to do an Andrew Luck impression.
No.
All right, let's talk about injuries, and that's obviously extra topical this week. Notre Dame suffered a couple new injuries in the past week since our last Football Never Sleeps. The Irish played Saturday without safety Tate Johnson because of a hand injury, and he will miss the Stanford game as well. Linebacker Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa suffered a season-ending knee injury against Syracuse on Saturday. Jalen Stroman stepped up in a big way in Johnson's absence against Syracuse. Who do you think needs to step up for Notre Dame with Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa out?
Well, I think it's a lot of people, and because he did a lot of different things and he did them very well. I think the most obvious one is Madden Faramo, the freshman linebacker, and had a chance to chat with Madden a little bit tonight. And those guys go way back to youth football. They were on the same youth football team, and then they played against each other in high school, and Kyngstonn and Madden have been really close friends. But Madden has a lot of really Kyngstonn type skills. I'm not saying he has as high of a ceiling as Kyngstonn, but I will say that his freshman PFF score is higher than Kingstonn's. I think Kingstonn's going to be a first-round draft choice someday. Madden has a chance to be really, really good. But I think you can get more out of Jalen Sneed. I think you can get more out of Jaden Osbury. I think Drake Bowen steps up a little bit in his game. And then if you're going to add to that group, Marcus mentioned it. I was going to ask him about it, and he ended up volunteering it. Kahanu Kia, which is a neat story. A guy that was a defensive end in 2021, took the 2-year mission, Mormon mission, then sat out last year with the torn ACL, has been banging it on special teams, and he is probably going to get some opportunities. He played really well in 17 snaps against Syracuse. Everybody played really well, but I mean, his PFF score was in the high 80s, which is really admirable. And I think some of the edge players are going to have to step up too. You know, Kyngstonn sometimes would sneak down there, would line up as a defensive end on some pass rush stuff. I think you're going to need to get more pass rush out of your defensive ends. How about you? Did I miss anybody?
I think you named everybody, and I think that illustrates just how versatile and important Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa was to Notre Dame's defense. One thing that I was hoping to ask Marcus Freeman about is like Marcus Freeman talks a lot about wanting his team to play with violence, and I feel like Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa does that maybe better than anyone. And how does Notre Dame replace that violence? My leading candidate for that would be Drake Bowen. I think he has that capability to do those things. But I think you have to combine skill sets from your linebacker position to replace Kyngstonn. Really, Jalen Sneed can maybe step up with his pass rush. Jaden Osbury can step up with his coverage. Madden Faramo just playing more and getting more opportunities in the defense. But yeah, it's certainly a team effort in replacing someone that has been able to impact so many games in his first 2 seasons at Notre Dame. A tough loss. There was a question that someone put in here. Paul said, please tell me a championship is possible without KVA, please.
I think it is. And the reason is what I mentioned about the mindset and the culture of this team. It's like they prepare for these moments. You know, they don't wait till it happens and then say, oh, what do I got to do? And probably the best illustration of that recently is Jalen Stroman. You know, he got demoted. Tay Johnson took over became the starter, and Stroman kind of fell down the depth chart even behind Luke Talich. And when his number was called, he played about as well as you could play as a safety. And he was ready, but he wasn't just waiting to put the practice in after Tay Johnson got hurt. He was working that whole time, preparing for his opportunity. And that's kind of what Madden did. You know, he started as a special teams only player, and Max Bull was like, well, you know, I'm going to probably play 4 linebackers this year unless Madden forces the issue. Guess what? By game 4, Madden forced the issue. So that's why I think it's possible to win a national championship without Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa, just because of the way Notre Dame prepares and steps up. Now, again, it would be an easier path to win it with him, but I still think that Notre Dame can be a really good defense without him.
And the players who are preparing and stepping up have a lot to do with it. Linebacker might be the position Notre Dame's recruited at the best since Marcus Freeman's arrived at Notre Dame. The offensive line may like a word there. Obviously, they have more guys that can play at the same time than linebackers can, but the linebacker position is stocked with talent. That's Madden Framo is a highly recruited guy, borderline 5-star guy. That if he's your next option up, like there are a lot of rosters in college football that are in worse positions than that in terms of talent that they're turning to at the linebacker position.
I mean, I can think of eras at Notre Dame where Tony Sacco would be knocking on the door, or Anthony Sacco would be knocking on the door, maybe Tony too. But you know, they are so deep at linebacker, they can really kind of bring him along deliberately. He actually may end up as a defensive end, but they are the talent level at linebacker. I mean, the amount of top 60 type linebackers when you're talking about, you know, the Rivals 250, or now it's the Rivals 300. It's stunning how many they got, all, you know, just stacking classes. And you look at their commitments in the next classes, and you're like, well, it's going to continue. They are really doing well with that position group.
All right. In terms of replacing Tay Johnson, who is going to miss another game this weekend, what's your confidence level in Jalen Stroman after the Syracuse performance and going into the Stanford game?
I think you ended up right in the sidebar. I think the kid handled it beautifully.
Yeah.
He's a guy that came to Notre Dame probably wanting to improve his NFL draft stock, has a brother that's played in the NFL and may still be playing in the NFL. And he looked like an NFL guy in that game. And I have not only confidence in him, I have confidence in Luke Talich. And I'll tell you what, Ethan Long lit me up in that game in his 21 snaps or whatever it was. I think it was almost a perfect score from PFF. It was like 98. And he looked Kyle Hamilton-ish. Now, again, I realized that the game was like a 63-0 game when he came in, or 56-0. But man, I'm really impressed with not only the present of the safety position, but where it goes after this year.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Kyle Hamilton with Ethan Long. That was something, like, he's not the same size as him. And he's like, to compare him to Kyle Hamilton seems hard because that's a high bar to clear or even match. But there's something about the way he moves that reminded me of Kyle Hamilton when I saw him in high school, saw him in camp at Notre Dame in person, and to see him get out there and flash was a cool moment. And yeah, the way that Jalen Stroman stepped up, I mean, you couldn't have asked for more. Like you're mentioning in terms of the NFL, I think if I'm remembering correctly, when we had Dane Brugler from The Athletic, he basically asked us, what's the deal with Jalen Stroman? Or he might have asked him more straightforward about Jaden Greathouse. But he did say Jalen Stroman was someone that he had his eye on coming into this season, and NFL personnel had their eyes on him, and that he was replaced in the starting lineup. Obviously spoke highly of Tay Johnson, and Chris Ash spoke highly of Jalen Stroman tonight in terms of what Jalen has done to stay focused and not get down and be ready for a moment when he was asked to step up, and Bernie said, "Was that really Jalen Stroman, or did Xavier Watts pull a Chad Powers?" I thought that was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, two things on that. Jalen Stroman, not only did he not have things go his way this season, he missed almost all of last season with an injury. Right. So he's been waiting a long time to look good. and then the Ethan Long thing, I hadn't studied his high school stuff. I knew that you thought highly of him and others thought highly of him, but man, he jumped out at me. That was impressive. The way, and it was way moved. It wasn't just the interceptions, the one that didn't count and the one that did count. It was in the run game too. He was like a heat-seeking missile getting after those running plays. I was just very impressed.
Yeah, and I wanted to throw in this question on Ethan Long since we were talking about him. Mike DeVoy said, was Ethan Long highly rated coming out of high school, or was Saturday just the right place, right time? He Rivals had him rated as a 4-star as the 39 safety. So he wasn't like a very high-end rated or ranked safety. The other services at the time, On 3, 24/7 Sports, and ESPN all rated him as a 3-star. So I was in support of the Rivals rating and ranking of him when he was in high school, and in sort of the first real glimpse of him, he lived up to that reputation. And we'll see what comes next for him in his career. But the depth of that safety position is starting to rival what Notre Dame has put together at the linebacker spot, because they're recruiting safeties at a very high level as well.
I think sometimes the kids that are at those New England prep schools, the recruiting services aren't quite sure how to rank them. There's some really talented players like Will Black was up there, Matty Augustine. And I think they're concerned about the competition level. And yet, like Will Black was from Canada. Some of these kids, the quarterback, Blake Hebert, was from Vancouver, Canada, and went east and so forth. I think you're getting better quality out of those schools. I know Tom Lemming liked Ethan Long a lot. He talked about him to me, about how good he thought he could be.
A couple more injury notes before we move on. Notre Dame deemed tight end Cooper Flanagan and kicker Noah Burnett as questionable for Saturday. Do you think Notre Dame needs either of them to play on Saturday?
I don't think they need to. It would be if they were 100% healthy and you could kind of get a glimpse of how they might be able to get some of the rust off and help you in a playoff. I think that would be good. But I mean, if they're 75%, it's not worth playing them and risking an injury and so forth. But I do want to see a formation where both Flanagans are in it. That's what I've been waiting for all year. And I do think that gives Notre Dame some more options in short yardage. And then Noah Burnett, I mean, when you think about it, he's missed a couple extra points, but he's 5 of 6 on his field goals. And it would be interesting to see if he got in a competition. Does that help if he doesn't overtake Eric Schmidt, does it help Eric Schmidt be better? Does it help him refocus and get his mechanics right so that he can be the kicker that they need? So I think anytime you have 2 options, it's better than having no options. So
yeah, Marty Biaggi spoke very highly to the impact that Noah Burnett has had on Eric Schmidt in terms of what sort of leadership and mentorship he can provide, even though obviously Noah Burnett is dealing with his own injury struggles this season. He's still been incredibly valuable for Eric Schmidt, and Notre Dame's just waiting for that right moment for Eric Schmidt to finally get his first field goal make. Hopefully gets a chance at that against Stanford. It's a tough situation because as a team, you don't really want your field goal kicker to get many opportunities. You'd rather score touchdowns, but it certainly would be nice for Notre Dame to see one go through, and Eric Schmidt specifically see one go through for himself. But I don't think that Notre Dame necessarily needs either of Flanagan or Burnett to play. But if they're healthy, getting them back out there certainly wouldn't hurt Notre Dame either. Wanted to throw in this question from Jeff. I can't keep track with Cooper Flanagan. Can he redshirt this year and play next year, or is he out of eligibility?
He is not out of eligibility, nor would he have been had he played this year. He is a true junior. So if he redshirts, he would have 2 more years after this season. So
he will redshirt. He's only played in 3, right?
Correct.
Or no, just the one. He's only played in the one game, right?
He's played in the USC game
Right.
in 4 snaps. So it's one game. So he can play against Stanford and all the postseason, and he can get that redshirt year. And so he will be a redshirt junior next year. So he would have 2 years of eligibility left.
Yeah, James Flanagan is the one who's played in 3 games and can play on Saturday for a 4th game,
and James is the freshman. Yeah,
James is the freshman. Correct. All right, let's go through some more of these questions we have from folks. T. Dawson says, many in ND Nation don't seem overly concerned that the doomsday scenario, BYU wins the Big 12, Bama wins the SEC, is likely to happen. Am I just more nervous about it than anyone else?
I'm not really concerned about it either. So I don't think it's a guarantee if BYU wins that both those Big 12 teams would be ahead of Notre Dame. It's possible. But I mean, there's so much that's happened in football this year, and Notre Dame is making it really hard, even in the doomsday scenarios, to make a case to knock them out. I mean, you win 70-7. What else do you have to do? So I'd say just get through this weekend, see what it looks like. We're going to talk about some of those later in the show about who you need to root for and so forth. But, what if Auburn beats Alabama? What if Deuce Knight and Auburn beat Alabama? Wouldn't that be something?
Andy in Georgia said, when was the last time Notre Dame had more points than passing yards?
I would not. I'm not loose emoji, so I do not know the answer to that off the top of my head. But that would be something interesting to look up. My guess would be in the 1940s sometime, or maybe in the 1912s.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I wonder.
Maybe it was when they beat Haskell 73-0 back in 1932.
I would probably start with the games where they scored in the 70s. But I don't know between now and then where there was. I mean, there probably were some bad passing performances, even in losses that may have had fewer yards than points. But I don't. It's a good homework assignment, but not one that we have access to offhand. Brian Habermill on Jeremiyah Love's first run, the 45-yard touchdown. Syracuse's safeties were approximately 8.5 and 12.5 yards off the ball at the snap. After seeing what Notre Dame did to USC, I'm shocked at those depths. Were you surprised as well?
I'm not surprised with anything Jeremiyah Love does. How people approach it. I mean, when Syracuse came into the game, not really very good at either aspect of the defense. So you kind of are picking your poison. Do you want to invest more resources in stopping the pass, or do you want to invest it in stopping the run? And USC invested it in stopping the pass, and Boston College had done run, and then Navy had also tilted their defense toward run. So, I mean, the really, really good defenses like Ohio State, teams that you're going to see in the playoff, Texas Tech, they can do both. When you're somebody like Syracuse and Stanford, you have to pick one or the other. Now, Stanford has had a lot of success against the run. They're a top 25 run defense. They're not anywhere near that. They're named in the top 100 in pass defense. So it doesn't surprise me because teams can't do both. They have to pick one or the other.
Yeah, I don't know why Syracuse would have chosen that specifically. Maybe the defense just forgot its game plan after waiting so long to get on the field for Syracuse with the way that game started. But I'm not sure why they did that. Obviously, must be some concern that Notre Dame could throw the ball against them, and obviously Jeremiyah Love made them pay. But I think the beauty of Jeremiyah Love is that he can make you pay however you line up. Like sometimes it's just not going to matter. It's going to matter what happens after the snap, more than where you're aligned at. You're going to have to do a lot of things to stop Jeremiyah Love from breaking off a long run. Okay, JP says, any thoughts on Miami versus Pitt? Number 3 degree for high predictions. Thanks and happy Thanksgiving.
Um, I think it's going to be interesting because Miami hasn't been out of Florida very much. It's going to be cold in Pittsburgh on Saturday. And I also think Miami matches up very well against Pitt. The things that Pitt is weak at, Miami has strengths. Think about them rushing the passer against Pittsburgh and how difficult it's going to be for Pitt to run the ball. I don't know if Desmond Reed is going to be available this week. He wasn't against Georgia Tech and they still won, but there's a world of difference between those two defenses. The one thing, though, is Pitt's a defense that could give Carson Beck some problems. But I think Pitt needs this to be a multiple turnover game in their favor. And so I think Pitt can be competitive. I'm not sure that they can pull off the victory. I do think, even though I think Miami should be ranked behind Notre Dame, I do think Miami's a pretty good team. I think they've kind of found a November stride right now. But them coming up into the cold weather this late in the season and not having traveled very far this year is going to be a wrinkle that's worth looking at.
Yeah, we talked about the game. Maybe it was on our Third and Gold podcast last week. I think we were asked to give percentages of whether or not we thought Pittsburgh could win against Georgia Tech and or Miami.
And who said 51% for Pitt at Georgia Tech?
I think my percentage might have been higher, for the record, but
no, it wasn't. I picked Pittsburgh to win that game.
I always felt
you said 45%. I remember.
All right. I thought I know my percentage was higher that Pitt could beat Georgia Tech than it could be Miami. That was I felt pretty confident about that because of the way Pittsburgh's offensive line, I think, will probably be exposed against Miami's defensive front. I'm not certain what Pitt does to come up with an answer for that. Maybe Miami crumbles under the pressure, but I'm not sure that I necessarily expect that to happen. So I think Miami goes in there and wins and continues to put pressure on the playoff committee as it relates to its ranking compared to Notre Dame. Mike DeVoy says, so if we tune into a post-game takeaways at around 8 a.m. Eastern next Sunday, are we likely to catch you live, concluding your overnight work after the game ends at 2 a.m.?
Maybe. We'll probably do it a little bit earlier than that, but not a whole lot earlier than that. Yeah. We've got multiple stories to write. I have to do the live post-game show with Mike Singer after the game and then write my 2 stories, and then we'll do the post-game takeaways. I'm hoping to have most of my research done for my top 25 before the game so that I'll have not as much to do after we get done with post-game takeaways to get my poll done in time.
Yeah, it's gonna be a late one. I'm gonna have to figure out when's the right time to nap on Saturday to fully prepare for Saturday night, because it's gonna be late. I don't like complaining about this job because it is a blessing to cover college football for a living. But starting your job at 10:30 at night, essentially, when that's not what you do on a daily basis, is quite the adjustment. But we'll get through it. It's just and don't have to. I'm not traveling or anything, so I'll just stay home and sleep and get back at it, because then it's signing period. The signing period's coming up next week, so no rest for the weary here at the end of the college football season. Mike DeVoy also asked, has Joe Otting regressed the last couple of games? He looked solid in the first couple of games, but seems to be giving up more pressures up the middle. Or is this a side effect of Strouth dropping out?
Tyler, I'll let you answer that since you do the closer film studies.
I haven't rewatched the game from this past weekend yet, so I don't have a honest assessment of what Joe Otting looked like. The offense wasn't on the field that often.
Yeah,
particularly
they ran offense. 39 plays.
I know. In the Pitt game, he had a pretty severely taped up ankle, and so I'm imagining that may have limited his abilities. I'm not sure. Again, like I said, I just haven't put him under the magnifying glass to see if that was still an issue this past weekend or not. So I would chalk that up more to what he's dealing with whatever ankle foot injury that he may be playing through, than a regression of sorts.
His PFF score was not good, especially pass blocking. But again, they didn't throw very many passes, so it's a pretty small sample size.
Right. When you have so few opportunities, one mistake gets a little bit exaggerated there. All right. Well, we have some more questions, but I wanted to set that up by getting into our Stanford talk. Stanford is coming off its 4th win of the season with a home win over Cal this past weekend. Eric, how different is your perspective on Stanford now than it was at the beginning of the season?
I thought going into the season they would be the weakest opponent on the schedule. I don't think that anymore. They've been a team that's really been good at home. I mean, Marcus Freeman wasn't blowing smoke today. They're 0-6 on the road. They're 4-1 at home. I was surprised at how easily they handled Cal. Now, that was a game where Cal had I think it was a 3 turnover differential and stuff, but still, they were able to run the ball, which they haven't done very much of at all this season. They were 2 of the worst running teams, and Stanford ran all over Cal. I give Frank Reich a lot of credit because they lost a lot of good players to the portal because of the coaching change. They lost Bear Bachmeier, who's BYU's starting quarterback. They lost David Bailey, who is an All-America edge rusher for Texas Tech, and some other pretty good players as well. I think I give Andrew Luck a lot of credit for changing Stanford's stance as far as taking portal players. They took 17, which is more than they have in all the other, transfer cycles combined. And they got some good wide receivers, including CJ Williams, who's really blossomed for them. So, again, I think they're a better team than I expected. How about you, Tyler?
Yeah, they're definitely better than I expected. I thought Tyler Horker and I even did this for a point counterpoint in the Blue and Gold Illustrated earlier this season. We debated who would be the worst team on Notre Dame's schedule, and I think he went with Purdue and I went with Stanford. And I'm not sure that's either of those are the right answers. I think Syracuse and Boston College are the 2 worst teams on Notre Dame's schedule this season. I think Stanford is probably better than Purdue right now too. I think Stanford has shown some fight, particularly when playing at home with 4 of its 5 wins there, and they're building some momentum. I mean, a win over Cal means a lot for that program, and I'm curious what Stanford looks like coming out on Saturday against Notre Dame with a chance to play a spoiler role. I do think the talent disparity is wide. Like, I think Notre Dame is going to be way more talented than Stanford, but there are some interesting players on that Stanford roster, and they'll take advantage of opportunities. That's what they did against Cal. Like, Cal was making mistakes and Stanford was taking advantage of them. I don't expect Notre Dame to make those same kind of mistakes, and so that should allow Notre Dame to handle the Cardinal. But if Notre Dame plays sloppy, Stanford is capable of taking advantage of that. What do you think Stanford does well, Eric?
There's not a lot. When you look at Syracuse's and Stanford's statistical profile, it's pretty similar. Where it's a big difference is run defense. They are 25th in the country in run defense, which is impressive. They're not very good in any other defensive category except for red zone defense, but people score a lot of explosive touchdowns on them. You look offensively, are they a different team with Elijah? I'm going to get his last name wrong. Is it Elijah Brown?
Brown, yep.
Yeah, Elijah Brown replacing Gulbranson. I mean, he was a big-time recruit that I think surprised a lot of people that went to Stanford. Then when Gulbranson beat him out, I think people thought, boy, he's only going to stay there a year and transfer out. But, I mean, his numbers haven't been great, but They seem to be a little bit more competitive on offense with him in there. Maybe it's kind of the Mason Heinschel thing that he just brings a confidence to the rest of the offensive players. But I mean, it's hard to look at something that they do really good other than playing at home. I mean, the point differential, how they play on offense is very different at home versus the road. And it's not like it's completely skewed with bad teams at home and really good teams on the road.
Yeah, and I think in Brown's first start against North Carolina, he really struggled in getting sacked a lot. I'm not sure how many times he was sacked against Cal.
Times. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know how many times he got sacked against Cal, but I know against North Carolina it was 9 times, and so that's something an inexperienced quarterback has to figure out, to get rid of the ball or understand where the pressure is coming from, and maybe he's going to make some improvements there. I think certainly you would like to think Notre Dame can do some things to disrupt what he wants to do in the passing game. And one question I have sent to Ben Parker, who covers Stanford for us at On3 with the Cardinal Sports Report, I'm curious, like, is Stanford's run defense as good as the numbers say, or do teams just throw the ball on them because it's so easy to throw the ball on them? Stanford is second to last in passing yards allowed this season with 284.5. So I'm not. And the ACC doesn't have a lot of good running offenses too, so I wonder if that's played a role in the statistics as well. It seems to be a more pass-heavy conference this season. So I'm curious of how good that Stanford run defense actually is, and certainly you'd like to think Notre Dame's going to test that with its running back duo. I see you searching. Are you getting any closer to the answer on the Elijah Brown? Is that what you're looking for?
Cal sacked them once, and Stanford had 5 sacks of Cal's quarterback, who I can't pronounce his last name, but he's going to be a good one eventually. They lost Mendoza. Yeah. Is it Sayapolte or?
I don't have that one. I don't have that one down yet, and I'm curious if
I like him a lot. Yeah, I like him a lot. Yeah, they just fired their coach, so it'll be curious whether he sticks there.
What do you think?
But yeah, it was one allowed, which is an improvement.
Yeah, for sure. What do you think Notre Dame should be able to take advantage of against Stanford?
Offensively, they're going to lean into the run. So I think this is going to be a game where CJ Carr throws more than 9 passes and more than 50 yards. I think they're going to be able to throw the ball. So we're going to see Malachi Fields and Will Pauling and Jordan Faison and Eli Reardon doing some good things against Stanford. Defensively, I think it's going to be very similar to what you did against Syracuse, but with a more able quarterback, but with maybe a worse protecting offensive line, if that's even possible. You will have to really be able to limit their running backs. They have a good one in Micah Ford, but they have so much sack yardage, and then they get behind, and then they feel like they can't run anymore. And I think Notre Dame is going to be able to stop Micah Ford. Now, Kyngstonn Viliamu-Asa was one of Notre Dame's best run defenders. Big surprise there. He might have been the best, according to Pro Football Focus. But I do think Notre Dame's going to be able to do what they want on defense. And then Stanford, I mean, some of these teams like Boston College and Stanford and so forth, you wonder why they don't invest more in special teams. I think it could help those teams win in the margins a little bit more. Like Pitt is a really good special teams team. And I think it makes a difference in their record because they invest in it. So, but, Frank Reich, he's an interim coach. Maybe the next coach will invest more in him, but they are a bad special teams team.
All right. We had a question here from Mark Anthony. Eric, I like the top categories you keep track of for rush offense, rush defense, etc. Where do we stand after the Syracuse game with those 6 or 7 categories you tracked? Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks. I actually compared all the teams that are kind of on the bubble in the playoff. But Notre Dame is really they profile as a playoff team. So if you profile as a playoff team, you're in the top 25 in those categories. That's what championship teams or teams that compete for championships tend to look like. And Notre Dame has improved. They were 0 for 5 after the Purdue game. They are 5 for 5. They're the only team that profiles in every one of these categories among the Ole Misses, the Oregons, the Texas Techs of the world. They are 19th in rush offense, 5th in pass efficiency, 13th in run defense, 22nd in total defense, and 5th in turnover margin. That's what a team that competes for a championship looks like statistically. That's the math test as opposed to the eye test.
Bernie Coder says, "Is anyone else a bit nervous about Stanford? I think we beat Stanford. We win the whole thing." That's an interesting reason. I wouldn't be nervous about a game like Stanford if I felt like I could win the national championship, right? It seems like two different things to me. That's a curious pair of sentences.
Well, I think Notre Dame fans are naturally nervous because they've seen movies like this before where something looked like it was going to be really good and then the unthinkable happens. I think this team is just too mentally tough to let that happen to them. And I think the Syracuse game kind of showed us, the Boston College game was kind of the hiccup mulligan game. And even then, there were elements of their team that played really well. And then they feel like a team that's just said, okay, we're putting our foot on the gas and it's all the way to the floor. I don't think that the Stanford game is going to be as uncompetitive as the Syracuse game, but I do think that I feel pretty comfortable with Notre Dame winning that game.
Yeah, I mean, I understand there being some nervousness. Like, I think most fans who are very invested in their team get nervous in moments like this. I think it's just the I thought it was funny the idea of, well, if we beat Stanford, we can win the national championship. It's like, well, there's a lot tougher teams on the path left to a championship than Stanford. So we'll see how that plays out. All right, let's get into. There's a question here from Indy in Georgia, and he sent a question in earlier that we didn't have an answer to. So I am going to scour the box scores to find out which running back has rushed for the most yards against Stanford this season. But before we do that, let's move on to some other talk about the college football playoff. Eric, assuming Notre Dame wins on Saturday, what do you think needs to happen elsewhere to aid the Irish? Let's start with this weekend, and then we can move forward and talk about conference championship weekend. Who should Irish fans be rooting for or against this weekend?
So I'm gonna take the games that kind of have a chance to happen, either because they're a rivalry game or it's, the point spread is reasonable. So Washington over Oregon. Washington plays Oregon in Seattle. I do think Oregon will win that game, but Washington can be a lot different team in Seattle than they are on the road. Auburn over Alabama. I would expect Alabama to handle Deuce Knight and so forth. But again, rivalry game. We've seen crazy things happen in that rivalry. You'd want to root for Pitt over Miami. You'd like Ari Wasserman to just shut up and quit kicking his feet like a toddler over this. And I'm just kidding. I don't even know Ari, but it just seems like such a strange hill to die on. I respect people that do make the argument for head-to-head. It just seems like he's really gotten personal with it with Notre Dame, and it's certainly rubbed the people on our board the wrong way, and I don't blame them. Ole Miss and Mississippi State in the Egg Bowl. Largely, Ole Miss is a better team, but largely because of what all the drama with Lane Kiffin. Is that going to be a big distraction? And then I think very unlikely for Georgia Tech to give Georgia a run. Haynes King has played big in that rivalry before, but I just don't think Georgia Tech has the defense this year to go with him. So those would be the games this weekend.
All right, what about conference championship weekend?
I think you need to look at 3 conference championships, and mainly 2. I think in the Big 12, it's better for Notre Dame if Texas Tech just goes ahead and wins that and doesn't invite the thing with BYU winning and then do both of them stay ahead of Notre Dame. Alabama, if they make the SEC championship, you would want them to lose to whoever they play, whether it's Texas A&M. The ACC, the only really rooting interest Notre Dame's fan fans would have in that is if Miami somehow got into the tiebreaker, and they're not in the tiebreaker right now, they'd have to leap over some teams to get into one of those championship spots. So a lot of weird things like Virginia Tech beating Virginia, for example, and SMU getting upset by Cal for Miami to get in there. And even then, I'm not sure that they win that tiebreaker. But if they were in the championship, you'd kind of want them to win it. That way, the ACC is going to have a team in the playoff anyways. It might as well be Miami. Then you don't have to split the hairs over the head-to-head. It means everything.
Yeah, I think there are folks that earlier in the season that were pushing back on. I think you and I were in agreement that it was best for Notre Dame in terms of rooting interest as it relates to the ACC. Just let Miami win the ACC, and that eliminates the rest of the conference likely from getting into the playoff. It becomes sticky if Miami gets in and an ACC champion gets in addition to that. I'm not sure that that's what will happen, but that eliminating that potential seemed like the ideal outcome from my perspective, but it certainly hasn't played out that way either.
Let me be fair about this head-to-head thing. I think head-to-head does matter. It's not the end-all, be-all. And let me just give one example. If you're going to play that game with Miami and Notre Dame, then why isn't SMU in front of Miami? Because SMU beat them down in Miami. They beat them in October. And they have a better record in the conference than Miami. They only have one more loss overall, but they have they're ahead of Miami in the conference standing. So why isn't that head-to-head the end-all be-all? That's what I want to know.
Because it's not as exciting, Eric, and Miami fans don't hate Notre Dame or don't hate SMU as much as they hate Notre Dame. That's what it all comes down to. Anytime you complain about Notre Dame, people are going to take advantage of that. All right, I found an answer for Indy and Georgia. What is the most rushing yards Stanford has given up to an individual running back? And there's 3 guys who have rushed for 100 yards this season. The top one is Jakarian Turner. I'm sure I butchered that first name. For Pitt, he rushed for 127 yards on 22 carries. That was Pitt's first 100-yard rusher of the season. I do remember that from Pitt preview coverage. L.J. Martin of BYU rushed 18 times for 110 yards against Stanford in its second game of the season. And then Miami's Mark Fletcher Jr. rushed 23 times for 106 yards and 3 touchdowns in its 42-7 win over Stanford. So Miami was able to run pretty well against that Stanford run defense, which has been statistically against the run this season. Sid Irish says, why no media talk about Bama's really bad loss?
I don't know that there isn't talk about that. I think when they were a one-loss team, people kind of said, and me being one of them, said, they've improved from that. They've distanced themselves from that loss. When they lost a second time, then it brings that loss back into the conversation because it becomes more of an important part of their resume. So I do think that that's one of the reasons they are behind Notre Dame, because they have, and the committee mentioned that. The committee mentioned the Florida State loss. So I do think it's talked about. But if they win the SEC championship game, that is going to weigh more into that conversation than the Florida State. And it should weigh more into it.
Yeah, I think some of what happens with these debates is that you only hear the stuff that you don't agree with. Like
Correct.
if you feel like Alabama isn't getting crushed enough, or if you hear like Miami's getting played up too much, like those are the things you hear, and you're maybe not going to hear all the other meaningful analysis that is happening elsewhere. Your ears are going to perk up to stuff that maybe you disagree with. So I think sometimes that plays a role in sort of the perspective or of the narrative, but it isn't necessarily always the case.
Well, and the thing about it is too, people like to isolate, especially if they're on TV or YouTube or whatever, they like to isolate just one little element, and usually the element that makes their point. But as an AP voter, you have to look at everything, and these aren't, hard and fast rules, because college football is so weird. You're comparing teams that don't have anything in common sometimes, not one single common opponent. But let's take the argument where you say, well, so-and-so's best win. Well, what's Ohio State's best win? It's Texas. But do we really think Ohio State isn't the number one team in the country because their best win is in Texas? And let's look who else they beat. Unranked Grambling, unranked Ohio, unranked Washington, unranked Minnesota. Illinois will be unranked this week after getting their butts kicked by Wisconsin. Unranked Wisconsin, unranked Penn State, unranked Purdue, unranked UCLA, unranked Rutgers, and now they play Michigan. I mean, that's not a murderer's row schedule there. No. But do we think Ohio State is not the number one team? But if you use that argument, they'd be number 11. You know?
Yeah, it can't all be built off of schedule. It can't all be built off like there's an imperfect formula in terms of determining who the best teams are. That's no matter how you build your bracket, that's going to be that's going to always be an issue. I mean, even if it's like, well, even if you build it into like it's only conference champions or whatever, only the top 4 teams in each conference. Well, how do you decide who's the top 4 in each conference? There's always going to be some flaw in terms of who gets in a playoff system. But then you put the teams on the field against each other and hope you get the best team to come out of that bracket to be the champion.
This selection process is so subjective, and it by its nature has to be. The problem is fans don't trust sometimes the people that are making those subjective decisions and feel like they have biases or whatever. And they
don't trust when they disagree with them.
Yeah, they don't trust when they disagree. But let me ask you something. This is what I did, the lead item on my Behind the Ballot column this week. And I put my opinion in that. Do you think teams' improvement should make a difference in how they're perceived by the committee and how they're perceived by AP voters? And then I used some of the categories for Notre Dame. I used Notre Dame because it's the team I cover. But do you think teams that are playing their best football in November should get the benefit in the eye test because they're better than they were in August?
I would say yeah. I would say yes. I would. My only slight pushback is like, well, Notre Dame shouldn't be get more credit because it was so bad at the beginning of the year, right? Like, there's teams that have played at that high standard throughout the season.
Ohio State,
like so, yeah. So yeah. It's not like black and white. Yeah. Like the teams that improved the most deserve it. Like, and I'm sure you don't believe that either.
I don't believe it either.
I think,
but I think teams that were good at the beginning of the year that have faded,
right?
Yeah,
if they are struggling, then that opens the door to question them more as the season, because who you are at the end of the season is most likely who you're going to be in the playoff, right? Like that's the most recent version of what we know you can be, and some of that can be injury related if you're struggling, right? Like you could have lost some important players and not handled that well, whereas maybe Notre Dame has handled that well, and so it does matter how you're playing lately. I don't think it trumps everything, but it definitely should be a factor in how you look at teams and what you're putting together at the end of the season.
Every week in that Behind the Ballot, I do this stat matrix where I take 24 key statistics and where Notre Dame ranks in those nationally, and then all their opponents, and I list those and update them every week. If you go back to Marcus Freeman's peeling the paint off the walls coaches meeting after the Purdue game, and then you compare them to now, Notre Dame in 24 categories has improved in 22 of them. And the 2 that they haven't improved, one of them is passing offense, not pass efficiency, but passing offense. Had they not, been embarrassed to throw the ball against Syracuse on Saturday, that would be 23 out of 24. That's what knocked them down, was only getting 67 yards passing against Syracuse. Otherwise, they would have been up there in all but one, which I think is third down efficiency, and I think it was 1 point down from what it was at that point.
Justin ND Sniper says Alabama has no tape on Deuce Knight. How much do you guys think that will play a role in that game? Alabama struggled with the FSU quarterback. That was just the first game.
I don't know I mean, he played against Mercer, so they should have some tape. So, although I don't know how valuable it is against Mercer, but Alabama's strong suit is its defense. I mean, they're a really, really good defense. I think where Auburn can give them some trouble is Auburn's defense against Alabama's running game and putting a lot of pressure on Alabama's passing game by making them one-dimensional. Alabama's been one-dimensional all year and been living right with that. But I think at some point, if they get into the playoff, they're going to have trouble. Like if they had to play Oklahoma in the first round, that could be a 5-4 game. I mean, but there are teams in the playoff that are really going to be able to exploit Alabama being a one-dimensional team on offense.
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's just because of the Notre Dame tie to Deuce Knight as the former Notre Dame quarterback commit, but Deuce Knight is not expected to be the starting quarterback against Alabama either. Ashton Daniels is supposed to be the starting quarterback, and interim head coach DJ Durkin said so today. I confirmed that on our On3 site, Auburn Sports. Okay. Ashton Daniels didn't play against Mercer because I think they were trying to keep his red shirt intact. And so that was part of the reason they gave Deuce Knight a chance to play. Now, they might play Deuce Knight, and I think there was some acknowledgement that he may play against Alabama, but it would be surprising to me if Deuce Knight is the reason that Auburn would have a chance to beat Alabama. But maybe he gets in there in some opportunities and makes some spectacular plays. I don't think Ashton Daniels is like a sure thing at quarterback by any means for Auburn either, but at least as of right now, that is their plan going into Saturday.
And if you say, gosh, that Ashton Daniels name sounds familiar, he was Stanford's starting quarterback against Notre Dame last year.
That's correct. Justin also asked, if BYU loses in the conference championship, is there a chance Miami jumps them but not Notre Dame, leaving Miami at 10 and Notre Dame at 9?
I don't know why, and I know why you asked the question. I'm just saying this and then I'll explain. I don't know why Miami would jump Notre Dame because BYU lost the conference championship. I think what people heard the commissioner Yurachek say last week was, well, we haven't had them in the same pod to do the head-to-head thing. But the committee right now thinks, or at least going into last week, they think Notre Dame is the number 9 team and Miami's the 13 team. Just because Miami moves up to 11 doesn't mean, oh, wait a second, we think now Miami's 8. Because Miami would have to do something to change that perception. I think people read too much into that. We haven't considered head-to-head in a head-to-head comparison because how the committee ranks teams is different how an AP voter does. They take 3 spots at a time, and they have debates about the 3 teams that they're considering in those 3 spots. And the teams haven't been close enough since Miami lost its second game for them to have that conversation. But Miami being where they are is significant. And unless they beat Pitt 70-7, I think it's going to be really hard to say, well, gosh, Miami has improved this much. I mean, Miami beat Syracuse 38-10. Notre Dame just beat them 70-7. And Miami played Syracuse fairly recently, if I'm not mistaken. So I don't see what would launch them over Notre Dame just because BYU lost the conference championship game. But great question.
Yeah, I mean, you could add Notre Dame struggling against Stanford to that because Miami beat up Stanford pretty good. That would be another head-to-head comparison that Notre Dame and Miami would have. I wouldn't put it past the committee to jump Miami over Notre Dame. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen. But
why would you think it happened? What's the rationale for them to be 9-13 and then they beat Pitt? They don't play in their championship game, And then all of a sudden, well, we think they're better than Notre Dame, unless Notre Dame beats Stanford by 1 point. What would be the rationale?
I mean, given their process, if they have not compared those two teams and then they now compare them, like,
but
that would be the
they are
rationale.
comparing those two teams. They're comparing the entire resume. They haven't done the head-to-head, but again, to them, head-to-head isn't all encompassing. It's something that they strongly consider, but it's not okay. No matter what, head-to-head means everything. Otherwise, they'd have SMU ahead of Miami at this point, or they would have had other teams that beat Miami ahead of them before, and they didn't. But you look at the comparative scores. NC State, it was 41-7. The game before that was Syracuse, 38-10. They beat Stanford 42-7. Those are the ones that they have in common. And to Miami's credit, I give them credit for playing Florida and playing South Florida. And Florida State was a conference game, and at the time that was a ranked win. And as it turns out, Florida is a team with a losing record. Florida State will be a team with a losing record or a 500 record. So those wins aren't as good. In South Florida, I still think is a good team, but they're not a top 25 team right now. And you look at their schedule, how often they leave the state of Florida for the SMU game, which they lost, and Virginia Tech. So I don't know what the basis is. I think, Tyler, you're misunderstanding what the committee thinks. It doesn't mean head-to-head is irrelevant unless they're in the same pod. It's just they have never had to compare those teams head-to-head for a spot. But if they're 4 spots difference, why would they all of a sudden say, oh, gosh, they're in the same pod? We've had this wrong all year. That doesn't make any sense.
I don't think there's anything holding them to having the same rationale from week to week. And I think that's part of the uncertainty in the college football playoff committee rankings.
But don't you think there has to be a reason for it? If Miami was playing,
but they can make up whatever reason they want. They're the committee. They can say whatever they want. I'm not saying.
Why would you do that? Seriously, if you spend all these hours looking at tape and people respect you and pick you to be on this committee, why would you say, you know what, let's be diligent for every week except for the last 2 or the last 1? Let's just screw with Notre Dame because there's nobody here to defend Notre Dame. So let's screw them because we love Miami. They sent us cheesecake for Christmas. It doesn't make any sense to screw them over. Yeah, it's a subjective process, but at some point, I mean, I've listened to the committee every week, and every week, whoever the committee chairman happens to be, and they've had 2 of them, has been glowing about Notre Dame and its resume and why they feel like they deserve to be a top 10 team. I don't know why that would change all of a sudden because BYU lost. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm not basing the discussion on BYU. I don't believe. I think the committee has said contradictory things that have changed from one week to the next before, and I don't put it past them to change in the future. I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but I don't think it's that. I don't think that they don't have to follow the same logic every week based on the way they handle the process.
I disagree.
We're past an hour here, so I don't know if we want to get into anything else. I know we talked about Jeremiyah Love for Heisman, and there was a question from T. Dawson. Who else in the Notre Dame Nation gets a vote? Tyler James, Tim Priester, Tim O'Malley, Tyler Horka. I voted today, number 4 on Heisman website. And I think you have some insight to that, so I don't know if you want to share.
I'm not supposed to say who the voters are.
Okay.
There are 6 kind of 7 in the northern Indiana markets. We're not supposed to. I'm the chairman for the Heisman.
I can say that I do vote. I have a vote, and Tyler Horka has said he has a vote.
But I'm not supposed to.
Right? Yeah. I'm not trying. I don't want to put you on the spot, so that's why I wanted to make sure.
But they explicitly, said I'm not supposed to share the list who's on it and stuff. But also, you're not obligated if you cover Notre Dame to vote the Notre Dame guys number one on the Heisman list either. You're supposed to vote for who you think is the best player in America, not who's the best player that you cover. So
I'm not sure. I don't remember when I first voted, and I'm not sure if I've ever included a Notre Dame guy on my Heisman ballot.
I can tell you when you first voted. I can't look it up right now, but I have a database. When they sent me the database, I became the chairman of Indiana this year. I took over for a guy that passed away that was a good friend of mine. It lists what your first year was and who you voted your first year. And for me, it was 1984 and Doug Flutie. I didn't remember what my first year. I thought it was 84, but I wasn't sure until I saw that database.
Did you know that you had voted for Flutie?
I thought I would have, but but Keith Byers was a very intriguing choice then too. And I realized that, most of my coworkers don't know who Keith Byers was, but he was an oversized tailback. You had an undersized quarterback versus an oversized tailback, and he was amazing. But Doug Flutie and the miracle pass against Miami is something that's college football lore, and I think that pass won Doug Flutie the Heisman, and he was good all season. I mean, he may be an average announcer, but he was a heck of a college quarterback.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up. We won't get into much recruiting talk. There's not a lot of new news to discuss as we get ready for the early signing period next week. Excuse me. And tune into blueandgold.com for more coverage of that. Mike Singer and Kyle Kelly are doing a great job, and we've got some signing day plans in the works and working on that ahead of next week. Hope everyone who joined us tonight has liked the video, has subscribed to our channel. And if you haven't subscribed to blueandgold.com, look out for the Black Friday and Cyber Monday deals coming. And hope you all have a great Thanksgiving. We appreciate you tuning in with us tonight and putting up with Eric and I disagreeing about the college football playoff committee. We had a good time and had a good crowd tonight. So thanks for waiting an extra hour for Football Never Sleeps. And we'll be putting that to the test this weekend with a late kickoff. All right. Have a good week, everyone.